And good afternoon. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but let's talk about. It's the beginning of 6 meter season, and GridTracker is one of those. There's many tools we use and integrated with Flex radios, but GridTracker is one of those tools you can use with pretty much any radio. As we go through it, it'll be the setup is identical, type of thing. And Andy, welcome to the not so every Friday show.
Thanks, Mike.
We had no end of technical problems, including me fighting with two-factor authentication for almost 40 minutes. And I started that at top of the hour. So we apologize for being late. So without any further wasting of time, we're going to show what we like about GridTracker, what Andy likes about GridTracker. We did one of these a few years ago. Pretty powerful tool, but we'll start at the beginning about what makes it one of those cool things to watch. And there's our first DX. Hi, Edwin. And we'll go from there. And so, Andy, what do you want to do? Want me to bring up my screen, or you're not sharing? So I'll bring up my screen, and you can talk me through it if you like.
That sounds good, Mike.
And here we are. Let me set the stage here. So what I have is, and Andy, you're gonna have to turn your speakers down just a bit. There's a bit of an echo. Over here, I have. Let me drag this in front. Just like we've all seen, we have WSJT running. This is actually live, although, of course, 6 meters went a little light for us at the moment. But here it is, and there's like VE3NEA. Call signs sound familiar? Alex writes CW skimmer and RTTY skimmer. So he's there. So what GridTracker does is listen to data. One of many things is it just listens to this information here and makes it visual. Andy? Go ahead.
Okay, so let's go from there. A couple of things that are worth knowing. GridTracker will work with WSJTX or JTDX. And Mike, let's be honest. We've got a bit of bias here today. We're just entering the sporadic E season, the start of the season, to the point where, hey, I'm going to see some transatlantic stuff. And we've seen some of that here in Canada over the past couple of days. Lots of great openings. And last evening was not an exception, was not a disappointment into the Caribbean and Central America. So what I like about this tool, I like to be able to see what's going on in the band. Now, again, there's another element of bias here, and we can get that out right away. WSJTX, JTDX, obviously FT4, FT8, and some of the purists amongst us might say, hey, you know what? That's not what 6 meters is all about. Don't forget weak signal. And I just want to footnote that. We recognize that. And Mike and I are going to get into, maybe in a couple of weeks, Mike, maybe something else that we can do with GridTracker. So for today, out of the box, GridTracker will do lots of great things for you. So one, as Mike has alluded to already, you can take data from JTDX or WSJTX and have it graphically represented here. Mike's setup is already complete, so let's talk a little bit about what you see there. You've first got a map of North America, and you'll see grid squares populated here. The red grid squares are grids that Mike has worked and has received confirmation for. Note, grab one of the squares. Here's someone that Mike's worked in a yellow square. Go to a yellow square, Mike. So he's had a QSO here. The station at the far end has Logbook of the World to confirm with, or EQSL. If you're pursuing, for example, a VUCC award, or perhaps the Fred Fish 6 meter award, you'll probably be using Logbook of the World. So this yellow square says, hey, I've sent the QSL, I've worked the grid, but I haven't received confirmation. Red square indicates that the confirmation is received. And Mike's got a number of confirmations or a number of QSOs in that square. Some may have confirmed, some may not have, but as far as awards tracking, it's there. Another thing that Mike can do, Mike, if you'll go down just about halfway on the setup screen on your right, click on that bottom center box there with the numerics. Let's get the grid square numbers in there. So this will give you a little better sense of what we're looking at. Now, Mike can also add radar overlay. So that's the bottom right corner of the grid, Mike. We can take that away. So we've got NOAA weather overlaying that. You'll also notice there's a lightning.
And why would we
there.
want thunderstorms and weather to show up?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. What do we see as a result of these storms? What are they going to do in terms of propagation enhancement? Well, a couple of things. There's the possibility of tropo. So tropospheric inversion might take place in and around those storm cells. Propagation enhancement. Another thing might be, hey, you know what? Time to disconnect the antennas, and there is a lightning tracker on the setup page as well. Kind of a handy feature.
Actually.
Mike, we've got something going on right now.
I interrupted you because I saw a grid square pop up, which I needed, from Whiskey 5 November Radio Foxtrot, and I'm looking at the screen, EM21. And if you watch up here, you'll see this change when it goes into transmit. And
there's the path.
There's
the purple square
right there.
Violet square says that station was calling CQ at the time. So Mike has answered that station. You'll see a red dotted line between Mike's station. That's the red over orange square. And each time you see that the dotted line come up, there's a transmission taking place. And you can see in the top right corner of the screen, that's turned to transmit. So details of the QSO there in the top right corner.
We'll tell you, by the way, how to make this work, how to have one program talk to the other. That was the key part of the discussion. And he's not answering me, so I'm not going to tie up things for the moment and be polite.
So why do you even want to bother to set it up? I think we've put that to bed. Mike, anything else we've missed there in terms of a quick overview of
no, other than there are multiple awards that you can track. Maybe you're tracking states or counties or whatever. You can toggle through. That's the I don't even know what they are anymore. If I'd have to zoom out to see what's being highlighted. That looks like a zone type of thing. Oh, ITU, so that's zones. For worked all countries, worked all states, DXCC. And this is, by the way, based on 6 meters. Okay, I have it filtering on 6 meters only. So if I was on 20, it would be, grid squares I don't care about on 20, but countries I care about, or prefixes I might care about. There's so many different types of awards that keep you going at things. This is U.S. counties. Yes, there's a lot of counties. And U.S. 48 states, I guess. And we'll go back to my favorites. But by the way, the manual for this is pretty big, but it's easily written, read.
I think that's the important piece here. Launch the program. It installs pretty quickly.
Works on a Mac.
Yeah.
Works on a Mac.
First thing you want to do is go and grab the gear. So in the icon square, but
that was a hint.
Down the right-hand side is the gear.
Right here.
Mike, let's go to the general tab first, just to get things set up. Now, here's the important piece for us. Mike's got a little bit of extra configuration there, but the important piece is, where am I going to receive information from? In this case, JTDX. JTDX has the ability, as WSJTX does, to broadcast information about the QSO, or what's been decoded by that program. And it's being pumped out on UDP port 2237. So in this case, Mike wants to make sure that that box says 2237.
Think of that, by the way, Andy, I've been using these as phone extensions type of thing to try to make it more latent, but it is, and only one person can use that extension on a PC at a time, correct?
That's correct.
Right. By the way, I just made a QSO. The new grid.
Mike's also banged in his grid square, his home grid square. Thank you very much. Now, as far as the rest of the functionality goes, at that point in time, you're decoding. It's that easy.
So let's look at the other end of the phone cord. And I'm going to drag another screen on top. Mine is a little different.
All right, let's go to
And
File.
We were going to use Andy's, but he's having some bandwidth issues. Under Reporting, and we're going to worry about this one right here. So go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, File, Settings. And in the lower part of the screen, you see Primary UDP Server. And Mike's got his UDP server address. In some cases, Mike, your circumstances are a little bit different than perhaps some users. That UDP server address could be localhost as well, right? 127.0.0.1. So if you're running this on the same PC as the other application, WSJTX, that's fine. Otherwise, you're going to, and this is beyond our conversation today, need to set up a subnet broadcast. Here is the important piece, though. We want to have port 2237 identified there. So again, any data that's decoded by JTDX in this case will be sent out on UDP port 2237. So that's the originating extension, if you will.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you here. So just to back up a little bit, 127.0.0.1 is an IP address. It means this computer. And for most of you, you'll be using this computer. For those that understand a bit more about networking, if you don't, plug your ears for a second. In my setup, I'm running, as I do in my remotes, I'm running on a computer that's local to the radio. It's actually 160 kilometers away. And because I have a VPN, it's sending the other IP address you saw is the computer I actually have GridTracker running on. This is the power of using the Ethernet to share this information, and why I do that presentation about the death of RS-232, to give us this power and flexibility. And if you take a moment to understand internet addressing, IP addressing, it's not complicated. And there's the address and the port. It takes two parts to make a connection, like making a phone call to a business where you dial a main number and then you dial an extension. If you think of it that way, that's all we're doing. And in my case, I had this address here was a proper machine address or computer address. So, but the key part was I'm going to scream it out. WSJT is going to say on port 2237 outbound going, "Hey, I heard this station." So that's all we're doing here. So I'm just going to cancel it here so it saves my settings. And like Andy said, look at that. We're back to, it comes inbound on 2237, and then we see it here. Andy, over to you.
So up in the top right corner, you'll see that Mike currently is in receive mode. So there is data being pushed along from JTDX into GridTracker. And there's a decode. So that decode data will eventually be presented onto the screen as a red square, a yellow square, purple square, and it'll also, in this case, you have an active decode, show you the path between two stations in those grids having a QSO.
Good.
Now,
what's this, Andy, underneath the red stuff?
What do you see underneath in the red
PSK
stuff?
Reporter.
PSK Reporter overlay. So any information that you can pull from PSK Reporter can now be displayed graphically. And let's go, Mike, can we go over to the bottom right? And you'll see this information. Go down, just down below where you see the caution signs. Here's the data coming in. from PSK Reporter. And what you can do is you can drop pins, if you like, for those spots. There's a pin function up in the settings, and you can say, how long do I want these spots to persist? On 6 meters, propagation can change very, very quickly. You can go from propagation into the Caribbean to no propagation into the Caribbean literally in the course of 30 seconds. It's over that quickly. So persistence on these spots, you probably want to keep it low for VHF or enhanced propagation. If you're, for example, using this on 40 meters at night, probably not a bad idea to have it a little bit higher. That's no guarantee that the station's still going to be there. So in the in this application with VHF, with enhanced propagation, keep that down nice and low. 10, 20 minutes tops.
It's also a good tool to know if you're being heard.
That's right.
By other stations, even though you might not. I see it quite often on the Ham Radio 2.0 Facebook chat. I got on and nobody's answering my CQs. And the first thing you want to know is, are you being heard by anybody? PSK Reporter is a very great tool for that. And as you've been watching while Andy was talking, I was moving the slider here with it left and right arrow key. And if you see, I'm up to 55 minutes and I start backing up, and you can see how that I was being heard more and more and more. And what have I been on today since about 8 this morning? So we'll go a long way back, and it didn't really change a whole lot. So we'll shorten it back up. But I used to have 2 screens open because I would go run over to PSK Reporter and say, hey, did anybody hear my broadcast? Sometimes in the Flex world, we have some DAX audio corruptions. It's the first thing I check. Just to make sure that my sound cards are working correctly. And there we go. Andy, the next thing I want to talk about is my current logbook. How do I get these red squares here?
How do you get those red squares there? Well, the first thing you could do, Mike, what logging program do you use?
So I use Ham Radio HRD. So we'll go back in here.
Very popular logging program. So Mike, in HRD, as in many logging programs, the DX Labs DX Suite, N1MM, for example, contest log, you have the ability to export log contacts as an ADF file. So
yeah, I can actually show that, Andy. Just a second. In every logbook program out there has the ability to export your log. And this is Ham Radio HRD's logbook. That's one of the few things I use. And if I go logbook, and you'll have to check with your provider, but this is also how we back up our logs, is by exporting them. And I can go into export as ADIF, and I can just say, give me my whole logbook, or filter it and give me just 6 meters or something. So ultimately, like in the PC world, we download a file and then we can upload it here in GridTracker by adding a file, and it gets imported. But there's other ways.
So that's first thing you want to do is import what you have. And you can choose to do it as Mike has done with HRD. Mike, do you use Logbook of the World?
I do.
So you're taking your contacts from HRD and you're pushing them up to Logbook of the World, confirming those contacts, and then bringing them back down.
Yes, and I haven't configured it fully, as you can see.
Yeah. But the cool thing is, as long as you have your TQSL, you have your call sign certificate in place, you can now go ahead, put your credentials, your Logbook of the World credentials in here, and you can ask GridTracker to go and pull that data down. So perhaps overnight, you worked some stations yesterday, Mike, in the Caribbean opening. Overnight, those stations may have gone ahead, updated their log, pushed that information up, and you now have the opportunity to refresh. So some of those yellow stations now may be red, or some of those yellow squares may be red.
Yep, and I haven't confirmed those in a while. So, and for other programs, they're all here. I like to say they're pretty obvious, but they're not pretty obvious type of thing. But what I can stress, if you're starting to use this and want to configure it, there are multiple groups for support. I don't know. Dave DeCoons is here. I should just invite Dave to jump in, but Dave can maybe comment. Do you know if GridTracker has a Facebook group? They certainly, I think, have a groups.io group. Those are the common places and you can also ask us for questions, even in our Flex Radio group as well, on how to set it up. That's scratching the surface of some of the many things it does. I have stopped using JT Alert since I'm using GridTracker most of the time. You can configure it to use both, but I found that JT Alert wasn't giving me the correct alerts fast enough, and this visual was, well, it's just fun to watch. It's like watching lightning
the
maps.
visuals got a lot of power to it, Mike. And for those of you who like the audio alerts, you can do those with GridTracker as well.
Oh,
New DXCC, new grid, new state, whatever you'd like to do in terms of setting up alerts, and you can filter those out. But I think one of the other more powerful features of this is Mike's got these pins pushed into the map. We've got some paths in there. You've got now a bit of a general sense of where that propagation enhancement is likely taking place. Now, if you're a DX Maps user,
I was just going to bring that up.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
but I have
Let's
to go
have
get
a
it.
look
Keep
at
talking.
DX Maps for a second and compare what we see here in Mike's GridTracker with what we have in DX Maps.
I haven't got it loaded, so hang on. I need to set it. And just go to 50 megahertz, North America. Okay, so here's let's F11 that.
All right.
Okay, but there's more, right, Andy?
But there's more. So let's just talk about this one for a second. For the most part, I think what you can see is there's a east-west component to propagation. There also looks to be a bit of a central states into the Caribbean propagation enhancement there as well. But you're largely seeing what Mike has seen on PSK Reporter. You can see those paths, you can see those openings. Mike, go press the MUF tab.
Okay, this is the extreme right tab, says MUF SP-E, which means
sporadic E.
Sporadic E. This is really cool. And I'm going to let Andy take a minute. I'm going to try to zoom in on this a bit for you because it needs it. Maybe not that much. Now there's no halfway in between. So there you go. So Andy, what do the green squares with the numbers mean?
So each of those squares that you see with color, and by the way, the brighter the color, the higher the number in that box, represents the MUF in that particular grid square.
MUF means
maximum usable frequency. The higher the MUF, the more likely it is that you're going to have propagation if you're at or below that maximum usable frequency. What you're going to see here is very reflective of what you've seen in PSK Reporter and also the DX Maps.
Right, we were seeing generally a path across, for me, 220, 230 degrees.
So Mike and I get up in the morning, we have a cup of coffee. Mike calls me on Ham Shack hotline. It's like, okay, where's the propagation going to be today? And you can start to look at these MUF squares, if you will, and say, you know what, Mike, this morning, we need to point over into Delta Mike. And you can basically drop a pin. Again, Mike, you've got your DX Maps configured. It knows where you are, right? Your FN04. Yes. So if Mike were to go and click on a grid square down in DM.
Oh, okay. I'm not logged in.
You're not logged in.
Never. Okay, now we're logged in. We should be able to go back and click.
There we are. So there's the path. And Mike could So, you know what? I've got a path through a number of grids that have propagation enhancement and have high enough MUF that I'm likely to be able to see some activity at the end of that path. DN32, maybe not so much. But if you look at the bottom of DM, so maybe DM 50, for example, so down towards the bottom and the center of DM, you've likely got a path.
Okay, Andy, we're about done. I want to talk about one more thing. Let me get rid of this. You and I were on the phone earlier today about lunchtime. Does that work? Yeah. And we're talking about GridTracker and cool things. Let me get rid of the weather. And all of a sudden, out here in Cape Hatteras, I forgot the call sign.
Go
That's a water band. Look at these two grid squares. They're pretty small, right? There's not much. And
Mike, pop up the numerics on there. So over on the right hand side.
FN 15, that's FN 25, right?
Go over to the bottom of the icons there, center bottom.
Center
It's
bottom.
the lone icon just above halfway. There you go.
Yeah, Fox Mike 25 and 26.
There's not much landmass there, is there?
Was it Kilo 2 Papa Lima? Was that who it was?
Kilo 2 Papa Lima? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that popped up. And of course, we both called them at the same time.
Ran
He didn't
away.
answer anybody. And I'm hearing, I don't know if my wanted grids are making it out to the broadcast, but I'm getting them on my headphones. So that's sort of why, if you're going to collect grids, these, look at this. I've got an orphan here, FM17, FM06, EN90. And normally I just look at it and go, yeah, that doesn't sound like I need that guy. And now with 448 grids, at least in the US alone, I can't remember them all. So one of the power.
Helpful. I mean, if you're seeking VUCC, it's an easy start to get 100 grids literally within a month of moving into our new QTH last year. I had 100 grids on 6 meters. Now it gets interesting.
What antenna were you using?
I have a Cushcraft A50-3, and Mike and I chatted about this. I have a great QTH in as much as I live on the side of a hill. I have a great fall off. So the angle out of here is fantastic. I don't need a big tower to get propagation or to take advantage of my height.
You're also firing through trees, aren't you?
I'm firing through trees to do much of the paths out of the QTH. It's a chimney mount. So I'm maybe 30 feet off the ground. In the course of 1 month, 100 grid squares. Now I'm into.
And that was on a wire, wasn't it, when you first started?
Yeah, and initially, yeah, off center fed dipole, cut for 40 meters. It is very nice and resonant on 6 meters in the bottom piece of the band. CW phone and FT8 work quite nicely. I have a little more directionality with the A50-3. We ran it through Yagi Optimizer, found a way to improve the front to back and make it a little bit more directional. It's served well. Mike, what are you looking at there?
Oh, I found a new grid. I need somebody in. Where is he?
I think you've worked that grid
Kilo
before.
5 Echo Yankee Charlie.
You've worked that grid before, though, Mike.
EML5.
You're red over green.
Oh well, see, that's okay. Oh, he's right here. Had not worked him before.
Oh, that's the purple one. There you go.
Yep. Well, Andy, thanks very much. We, as usual, a lot of my presentations are about getting you to think and get started and kick the can and see what you can do. And as I always say, when you break something, you learn something. So don't be afraid to break something. And Andy, if anybody wants to get hold of you, do you have an easy way? Just your QRZ email address?
VA3CW@rac.ca.
And me, you can find my email address buried in QRZ. It's not in the email field. You have to actually read the first paragraph.
And I'm good in QRZ as well.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for your questions, and lots of expertise in this group. And if you have Flex questions, lots of expertise in the Flex Radio community at community.flexradio.com. And if it's a GridTracker question, feel free to jump in and look at it's divided into areas, the third-party programs type of thing, and lots of good help there. 73, everybody, have a great day. Hopefully get good 6 meters over the weekend, or whatever DX you choose to operate. Take care.
7-3, good DX.